yeah, I mean, ultimately, you just have to keep going. And I think as humans, we just find a way to do it. Like, if you asked me if I could have done this before I was ill, I would have said no, no way. But I think just when you're in that moment, you just do it. I think everyone just they just find a way to do it. I think there's probably a part in our brains somewhere psychologically that just makes us just push on.
Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily, bringing the conversation about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Because along with birth and change, if there's one thing that's going to happen to us all, then death is it. And we're going to explore how death actually shows up for us on the daily in a multitude of ways, and how when we allow ourselves to accept and to be with death, how it can teach us a whole heap about how to live this life well. Today's conversation has got me really thinking about how I take my health for granted, about how overnight everything, my world, me, my identity, what I'm able to do in this world, how it can change. And today's episode is going to speak to a health journey and diagnosis that is life-changing but not life-threatening. And what's this got to do with death? It's got a lot to do with death, because when something forces that change in life, there are deaths that we experience within ourselves. For example, death of our former self, parts or all of our identity, key years that maybe we feel we've lost when we're in recovery or navigating that forwards path, those milestones and those rites of passage that are unable to be completed, things that we love that we no longer can do, and more. But also, when we navigate these big periods of change, we might also see that new beginnings and growth, that they can sprout as a result. And as my guest today shares, these journeys through our health, through these diagnoses, they're complicated. Jack Lawrence, also known as Culture Force, is a fashion and sneaker content creator and entrepreneur. If you're in the streetwear and sneaker scene, you probably know his name. And he and my hubby, Jordan, also known as Sneakonomics, actually started out around the same time in 2020. And Jordan and I have watched Jack flourish and grow to 1.3 million followers on TikTok. And what I didn't know until recently is that Jack was doing all of this while navigating an incredibly difficult journey with PoTS, which is Postural, Orthostatic, Tachycardia syndrome. And what I didn't know until today was what a catalyst Jack's journey with PoTS has actually been in his path as a content creator. Real testament to the depth of our human resilience and that which can sprout when we allow ourselves to move through the difficult. So Jack, welcome to Death on the Daily.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm very excited. We've now got to pretend like we haven't had a conversation for about 20 minutes before this recording.
Yeah, and 20 minutes as well of tech struggle.
Yeah. Well, it was worth it in the end, for sure.
It was so worth it. And Jack, so you are really good mates with my hubby, Sneakonomics. You are Culture Force. So we sort of met through the sneaker world, but today we're not actually here to talk about sneakers. We are here to talk about something that is also very close to your heart, and that is your sort of health journey as you've been navigating since you've been diagnosed with PoTS. So I just want to open up the space just to hear a little bit about you, your story. I know there was quite a journey into your diagnosis as well, but just tell us a little bit around that journey.
So I was pretty fit and healthy in around kind of late 2019. So this was just before all the kind of like news around COVID-19 in the East, before it kind of came over here. It was all like speculating, and then I had the flu, and I actually remember joking around like, wow, imagine if it's COVID. Obviously it's not funny now, and it wasn't funny then, but it was like friends were like, wow, imagine if it was that type thing. Like, how unlucky would you be to have that? And obviously in like, this was January 2020, right? So this was just as it was all kicking off. So late 2019 was when I think that was when I picked up this illness or whatever it was, all this flu that brought on what I have now, the PoTS. But obviously I didn't notice at the time. And then come to like super early 2020, like the new year, I was really, really unwell with this flu, like bedbound for about 7, 8, 9 days. And then it took me 2 weeks to kind of recover. And I actually recovered, so I got better. But then a couple of weeks after that, so kind of the end of January, I was sat at my desk and I had the most insane feeling of starvation. Like I've never ever felt hunger like that before in my thankfully, in my life. I'm very blessed. I haven't had anything like that before. And then all of a sudden I was just like struck with this insane like sense of hunger. And I was so hungry, I couldn't breathe properly. I felt so faint. The blood pressure must have been like really low. I nearly like collapsed. And so I walked to my uni kitchen. There was a very uni kitchen. So I cooked like chicken and rice. Because I thought that was going to be like a healthy thing for me. Now I know that's not a very good meal for me to eat. But anyway, I had that, and then I had like this huge crash after it. Like my body basically couldn't process the food. So like all my involuntary body systems, my nervous system, so stuff that your body does, your brain does for you without you consciously knowing about it, breathing, digesting, sweating, your blood flow, stuff like that. My body forgot how to do it because of this virus.
Wow.
So not entirely forgot, because I was still here, thankfully, but it would just knock my whole nervous system out of whack. And then that was it. That was for the next like 2-3 years until kind of like 2023, early 2023. That was when I was diagnosed in April 23 with PoTS and autonomic dysfunction and a couple other things that are a bit complicated, but it's all kind of under the PoTS umbrella. And yeah, that was it. But I had 3 years basically completely bedbound. I lost a lot, like not just like not like friends and stuff, but just like opportunities. I was I just lost normal life. Everything got away from me. Like there was a point where I literally I would go. I never wanted to like do anything too drastic, but I always kind of told myself that I wanted to fall asleep and kind of never wake up. Like when I actually went to bed, because it was the only time I ever kind of was at not peace, but like was my body was at rest, was when I was actually sleeping and resting. That was when I actually felt comfortable, because I wasn't, I was so unwell. But anyway, and now I got diagnosed, and then things are getting a bit better. I'm actually seeing my doctors, like the PoTS doctors, at the end in a couple of days. I'm having a hypoxia test thing, which is like a fit to fly, which I know I will pass, so I'll be able to fly again soon, hopefully. I've actually came off my blood pressure medicine 2 weeks ago, and I just went for a run, and I was all right. Touch wood, now I'm doing this. In fact, yesterday I felt really quite unwell when I woke up, but I went into London, I had a driving lesson, and then I went for food. That was insane. I literally couldn't eat out because my body I lost so much weight when I was ill, because I couldn't like digest food properly. I couldn't obviously go out and eat in public, because I had to eat things like nuts and fruit, like just all the time. So I couldn't have regular meals out. But anyway, now that's just the contrast of where I am. I'm definitely not 100% better, but my life is well and truly, I have a life compared to what I knew was so nearly kind of taken away. But yeah, that's the kind of brief but sounds very detailed part of my kind of journey, if you like.
Jack, thank you so much for sharing. And obviously, I mean, that's such a long period of time from 2020 to 2023 and getting that diagnosis. And obviously what I could really feel in what you shared and from our conversations before is, there's a lot of things like, things that we take just for granted. I can go and eat out. I can go for a run. I can go swimming. I can go on holiday. Yeah. That actually for you, that wasn't a part of your reality for, a significant period of time. And now obviously sort of it's coming back in. And I suppose there's so much I want to speak to, and we'll go, I think, venture into sort of that, that shifting of you and that which you lost and then that which you've regained. But before we get there as well, just explain to anyone who's watching or listening, who's maybe thinking, what is PoTS? I've never heard of it, or maybe I've heard of it, but I don't really know what it is.
Yeah, so it's basically kind of an umbrella term for a lot of like autonomic dysfunction issues, so like nervous system issues, stuff like that. But PoTS itself is probably most well known. I'm not going to pronounce the full name of it because I always get it wrong, butcher it. But ultimately it's to do with it has a lot of different factors included, so like low blood pressure, high heart rate, and it's basically your nervous system not doing those like involuntary things properly, right? So if I describe the symptoms, some of the main symptoms, because it's probably easier for people to who are listening to understand. So syncope, so like dizziness, vertigo, breathlessness, chest pains, blood pooling like at the bottom of your feet, because your blood, like I said, it can't like regulate properly, right? So whilst when most people stand up, they will your blood will your I don't know what it is, but your blood gets redirected up through your body correctly, right? Ours, people with POTS, just falls all the way down, and that's why they get people. I say people who with POTS because I don't really have too much dizziness, thankfully. But some people, the majority, one of the main symptoms is actually this: like when people stand up, they fall straight back down. Unfortunately, when and whatever, and it's due to the hydration and the blood and all this kind of stuff. So it is really complex, and unfortunately, there's not really enough research at all from it. The one, if there is any good things about being diagnosed with this disease or having this disease, is purely the fact that due to like COVID, it's a post-viral condition, right? So you can get it. You can there's pot like I guess traditional POTS that aren't post-viral, but there's also post-viral POTS which a lot of people have thanks to COVID and glandular fever and stuff like that. Obviously, due to COVID infecting so many people across the globe, there's now hundreds of thousands of people with POTS who know about it, who don't know about it, who are desperate for a diagnosis. And unfortunately, I mean, for an example, how unresearched it is, I was when I was seeking my diagnosis, summer 2020, I saw this really well-respected cardiologist at a very good hospital. And I sat there and my mum actually asked him, is it POTS, like on this video call? Because obviously it was COVID, no one could see him. And he literally said, no. He said, you don't want to be branded as POTS. It isn't POTS. So, and that was it. And then it literally was 3 years later, about 2 years and 10 months later, I got diagnosed with POTS. So my mom was right all along.
Wow. And that you don't want to be branded.
Yeah, exactly. How insane is that? Like, that's crazy. It literally is insane. I try not to think about it too much because it makes me so annoyed, but it's just, I guess it was really difficult for doctors at that time, right? It was COVID, and they were probably seeing an awful amount of stuff going on. So, yeah. But thankfully, I'm one of the lucky ones. I actually got diagnosed, and I had one of the main tests, and I was lucky to see some very good doctors. And I actually have a TikTok account dedicated to the POT stuff. And it's really sad because all my message requests are just begging. I have people send me their like POTS reports, their test reports, their blood pressure readings. Obviously, I can't do anything with that. I don't. But there's just hundreds of people in my DMs over there, more than my main account with like millions of followers. Just people begging for advice. It's really, really tough. So it sucks.
Yeah, and I think it's really, really hard, isn't it? Because obviously you're on the other side of a diagnosis, and I'm sure as well you can really connect into that path to it. And obviously, again, as you shared, there are challenges, there are those barriers that just an individual can put up just by a flippant remark and sort of shutting down a pathway. But also, I've checked out it's Culture Force Recovery, isn't it? I've checked that out, and I think what's amazing as well is just it's that kind of, you just show the reality, the crashes. I saw as well your video where you were talking about, is it the test where you're put on a table and it's sort of,
it's so bad. I say it's bad. I'm very fortunate to be able to have it. But yeah, the actual way of diagnosing POTS, or one of the ways of diagnosing POTS, is the tilt table test. Some doctors don't. I can't quote doctors, but from what I've heard and spoken to doctors about, some kind of believe in it, if you like, others don't. It's basically where you tilted 70 degrees for 45 minutes to obviously make you as symptomatic as possible. The doctors kind of correlate or compare your symptoms that you have at the time of that kind of tilt with the blood pressure and heart rate monitor you have on, and they're taking bloods at the same time and stuff. And it's a really kind of backwards test because they make you deliberately symptomatic, which is annoying. But it's weird, but it works, I guess.
Yeah, I can imagine though, in that when you're going through it, that must be really, really challenging, particularly if it's those symptoms that you've been obviously really concerned about. I didn't know anything about POTS until I met you, and so therefore I could imagine that for people who are navigating that path towards a diagnosis or on the other side, that actually it can feel really, really isolating. One thing I want to ask you is around how the world has changed for you, in that kind of, I suppose, the world before you had that flu and then you started to get those symptoms end of 2019 into 2020, and I suppose the life before and the life after. How did your world change?
I think a lot of it now is around. I guess there's the kind of medical sense of it where I have to now take protocols and be sensible what I do and stuff like that. And I have a different lifestyle, but there's also the kind of perspective element as which is massive. In the sense of like I've gone through a not super traumatic, but a traumatic enough experience like that is definitely life changing, and it's definitely changed the way I view stuff. I'm definitely a lot more kind of aware of kind of healthcare and how important it is and how valuable like having your health truly is, and that you can have as much wealth as you want on the planet. Without your health, you have literally nothing. Uh, but yeah, I think perspective is the big one, because ultimately it's changed the way I view stuff for sure. I try and take life a lot less seriously. It's difficult to do that with work, but that is always very humbling. So whenever I actually get ill again, or if I have a bit of a relapse or a crash or whatever, it always actually humbles me. Sometimes it can be a good thing, although for me physically it's not good. Sometimes for me mentally, it's nice to realize how far I've come, and kind of by having a bit of a kind of I guess issue, if you like, health issue. Or just a little flavor of what it used to be like, So that's kind of always at the back of my mind. But then there's the negative side of it where it's I'm super anxious to do stuff like plane, travel, be without medicine, be without water and electrolytes and stuff that helps my coping mechanism to PoTS, basically. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty bad. I mean, when I had my podcast, I had to bring my girlfriend with me to every single podcast because I was too worried I couldn't do it on my own. It was crazy. And I only lived 20 minutes from London, and it was in London. So yeah, it was really, 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 really weird. And it was kind of like having to learn to grow up all over again. So yeah, there's definitely lots of positive. There are lots of positives. It's easy for me to say there's lots of positives because I am getting better. I imagine someone who's still stuck in this rut or who has this condition, and I still have the condition, but who is worse off than me, won't say it's positive. But thankfully, because I'm very lucky and I've nearly came out the other side of it, I can see the positives a little bit more. But then there's also definitely a mix of negative stuff that requires you to jump kind of back over. But hopefully over time, and a bit of assistance, I can slowly kind of get back where I was,
Yeah, and I think you so powerfully summed up the fact that in these experiences, you mentioned it being traumatic, and then you sort of almost were like, oh, actually, but it is traumatic. I will say, that's big to go through, and to have that, for 3 years, to have that uncertainty, to be feeling those symptoms. And actually there is, post-traumatic growth, and that is something that comes through, but that's not to negate obviously the fact that actually there is a lot that you've held, and there's a lot that is crap about this experience. But actually, I think what you so powerfully shared there is something that any of us can take forwards, whether it is that actually we've had a life-changing diagnosis that has shifted our view on the world, whether it's that we're navigating any other sort of challenge in life, is the fact that actually there are those opportunities to look for, those glimmers, those bits of growth that can come through that. And that's not to say that we also can't say, do you know what, it's also been really crap, and if I could rewind time and not have it happen, I would absolutely do that in a heartbeat. But I think that was such a profound share in that space of the good and the bad. So I just wanted to ask, have you ever felt any sense of, I suppose, grief, sadness, pain around any of the loss of sort of your previous lifestyle, any elements of it?
Yeah, definitely. I think I definitely look back, and it's hard to understand, just kind of suck up that I lost like kind of the best years of some of the best years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, 'cause I was 21 to 24.
Mm.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
To be really quite, and I'm still unwell now, but obviously
Mhm.
now I can go out party until about 11 o'clock and have to go home. And I might be lucky to have one very, very, very minor drink. In
Mhm.
fact, I can't have stuff like beer, but there are ways around, certain things. I can drink certain things, but anyway, yeah, for sure. The definitely I was definitely grieving a lot when I was ill, a lot more than I am now. I think because things are going well for me in like work and stuff, and family and life and that kind of stuff is in an upwards trajectory. So it's probably easy for me to deal with it a little bit. Whether that comes back again, and even when I'm better, if that kind of grief comes back again in the future, potentially, I'm not sure. But when I was, yeah, before my diagnosis, it was really, really bad because I was purely just like, what if I didn't get ill? What would my life be like now? Where would I be? Because I had to leave. I didn't leave uni, but I never went back. So I just did it all online, which sucked. And that was a year and a half. So my course was 3 years, and I did 1.5, and I missed some of the best years, or best year, some of the best moments, I guess, which really sucked. And yeah, it was difficult for sure.
Mm. Yeah, I think if I'm connecting into when I was at uni, that's a lot of uni. And that's a lot of, I think as well, it's around that. It's just those sort of rites of passage, isn't it? And so I could imagine that sense of loss around them, because there are things where, you can get sort of, I suppose, a new era of social life, new era of going out to restaurants, etc. But there are those things where, yeah, you can't get that period of time in your life between 21 and 24 back. And I could imagine that obviously comes with a lot, sort of emotionally within you, as well as, I suppose, in this forwards path as well, where you acknowledge that there could be grief that comes up at other points. So I think that's really powerful. And I would love as well to hear, if you have any advice for anyone who is, whether it's the navigating POTS or perhaps another diagnosis, or they haven't got to diagnosis and they're navigating a health journey. From where you're sitting right now, what would you say to anyone who is on a similar path?
The one thing that the doctors who didn't diagnose me did say that really helped me get through it, I guess, was that if you don't have a diagnosis for after a longer period of time like I did, it's most likely the condition or the disease or the illness or whatever it is most likely not going to take you. It's not going to kill you, right? So that really gave me some hope, was that I can still live life. I might be able to might be able to get it and catch it and whatever. So that was good. Whenever I was at my worst, I always my people around me always reassured me, was that, or I told myself, was that however bad it gets, I'm not gonna peg it. I'm still here. So that's a very dark, maybe a dark way of looking at it, but ultimately was probably one of the only glimpses of hope, of like actual factual hope the doctors gave me, which was good. But yeah, I mean, ultimately you just have to keep going. And I think as humans, we just find a way to do it. Like if you asked me if I could have done this before I was ill, I would have said no, no way. But I think just when you're in that moment, you just do it. I think everyone just they just find a way to do it. I think there's probably a part in our brains somewhere psychologically that just makes us just push on, and no matter what the circumstances are. So just, I guess, find that and try and keep fighting for a diagnosis. And if a doctor, on a more technical term, if doctors are kind of pushing you away and batting you away, you just got to keep going back. You got to, if it's POTS or if it's a condition that requires blood pressure monitoring or heart rate monitoring, just monitor everything at home, bring it to them on a piece of paper and just put it in their face and say, look, this is what I've got. Because if you've got a condition that's difficult to diagnose or a chronic illness, some days you're good, like really good, and you won't be symptomatic. So your blood pressure will be fine, your heart rate will be fine. Mm-hmm. But the next day, your blood pressure will be bad after the doctor appointment or whatever, because stuff like adrenaline has a really big impact in conditions, right? So that can often override symptoms so if you're having this huge doctor's appointment or this huge opportunity, your adrenaline might kick in. and ultimately mask symptoms and blood pressure and heart rate and all this kind of stuff, and or not necessarily blood pressure and heart rate, but just mask symptoms, right? So yeah, you just need to monitor as much as possible at home, and then yeah, it's a really difficult one to try and get diagnosed, especially in this current day, because there's right, the NHS is so underfunded, and that's not the doctor's fault at all. They just they don't have time to go and read the latest PoTS update or update on whatever condition. Sometimes it's really difficult for them because they just have so much going on. And yeah, it's crazy. If you're lucky enough to afford private healthcare, sometimes that's probably a good way to find some of these doctors, mystery doctors and mystery illness specialists. Is how I got, I guess better, who diagnosed me in the end. So yeah, I think just keep persevering, and even if doctors, sometimes it really depends on the person. Doctors are humans too, right? They've got a lot of stuff going on in their personal lives, so it's easy to miss something. It's so easy for a normal person to miss something. So just keep going back. If you got the funds, if you got the money, if you got the accessibility to keep going back, just keep going and going and going, trying different doctors, and you will eventually get there. It's very unlikely that you'll be undiagnosed your entire life. There was my girlfriend met a lady who was outside my tilt table test waiting room who was undiagnosed for 26 years, and then she finally got it.
Oh my goodness.
So eventually it happens. But sometimes people get conditions early on before they're properly, someone's got to get it early, right?
Yeah.
It's awful, but eventually it can come to fruition, and hopefully people can get some kind of answer.
Yeah, I love that. Just keep going with it and keep trying. And I could imagine as well. I mean, obviously, it depends on you knowing. For example, I think this is PoTS, but I could imagine that if you also have an idea, there's probably some charities out there for a lot of these conditions where you can reach out to them, even just to get some advice of this is what I'm feeling, what could be my next avenue. Because if it is the NHS, I've got I was referred for something recently. It was like 24-week wait. I was like, wow, that's half a year. Cool.
Yeah, crazy.
So, and that is frustrating because obviously for me, it was nothing that's, that I could feel it, that was really critical. So, but I could imagine if it's something that you're really feeling, and again, you're faced with that, the waiting list, etc. It can be so frustrating, but I love that. Just keep going. And also what I could really feel was that resilience that you shared, Jack, around like the fact that actually we humans, we have a resilience. It's something I often think about this of, how, war zones and devastation and stuff. How on earth do people just pick themselves up and keep going? And, I believe, and the more I have conversations in this space of people who are navigating really, really difficult journeys and journeys where we have to shed, our identity overnight, or, we've lost someone who's beloved to us, or we're navigating, a difficult diagnosis. I believe that the human depths of resilience, we don't know it until we go through that. And it was exactly the same for Jordan and I, when we lost our daughter in pregnancy, that it was that thing of, I was like, I will never get through this alive. That was what I said to a friend. And she's like, you will, you can, and you will. And we did, I did, and so I think that is definitely that call out to everyone that, yeah, you can keep going. And it's just taking it one step at a time, isn't it? Just where are you right now? How can you honor yourself in this moment? And then obviously hold on to that hope as you did, Jack, of like, actually, there is a pathway out of this. There's that pathway through it.
Yeah. And I found some comfort in the fact that, you're not alone. Very rare, very rare that you'll be the only person who is going through it. I think as humans, we often think like you have a right to be healthy, right? And unfortunately you don't. Some people are just super unlucky or whatever happens. But yeah, it is a sticky one, but I think, yeah, there's definitely some kind of pocket in there that will just, whatever it is, will just naturally push you through it. And you don't know it. You never find that until it happens, which is so remarkable about like the human body. I think everyone has it. And I think your body just adapts, right? Like you were saying, that the word shed's really good, because that is exactly what it is, that you shed a new, I guess, lease of life, or lease of perspective or mentality or just strength. And
yeah, exactly that. It's that sort of that growth that comes through it, because once you realize those depths of resilience that you hold and how much you can hold and navigate through, you can't unsee that. So that's always with you. But it is just unfortunate that if you are one of those who are navigating it, then obviously it is the only path is through it. And you mentioned around community, and I know obviously that your Culture Force community is strong, and that support has been there for you just in all aspects of your journey, on this health journey, on sort of everything that you're doing in content as an entrepreneur. And I would love to hear from you sort of what role, did that community, whether it's obviously in the online space as well as those offline who have really supported you. What did that community, what role did they play in your journey and getting through this?
Yeah, well, I think the cultural side of things is pretty simple. I mean, it was the community was I mean, literally everything. Excuse me, because without them, I ultimately wouldn't have had the funds to go private healthcare. I probably spent about, I don't know, 10 grand trying to get diagnosed, and all that money was my own money, and it's ultimately the only all cultural's money, right? And it was all spent. It was all that money was achieved through brand deals and through people watching my content. And without those people, the community and the people watching my videos, I wouldn't have got better. So ultimately, the actual bottom line, the foundation is that I was able to seek the best medical healthcare because I was able to monetize and make money and have a job where I didn't need to go. I couldn't go into an office. I couldn't work a full-time job, right? I couldn't do a part-time job. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do a commute. So at the time I was filming in my mum's bedroom, my mum and dad's bedroom. And that was it. And I was doing brand deals for thousands of pounds in that bedroom. And that led to me moving out, and then ultimately led to me being diagnosed, which was the best things that ever happened to me in my life. A game changer. So yeah, I mean, it's absolutely everything. And I think that's why, weirdly enough, I think that's why I try and kind of separate myself from Culture Force a little bit. I'm quite happy with Culture Force being my job, whilst a lot of creators will be so connected to them. So like if someone says a bad thing about me online, not like it's very common at all, but if someone doesn't like what I say or what I look like or whatever, and comment some hate or whatever, it really, really doesn't impact me at all. Like, I mean, literally not at all, because the separation is so real, and because the greater good is so much greater. Like, it's so much greater. Like, getting better is from making videos on the internet, which aren't harming anyone, and some bring some positivity to some people, I guess. It's ultimately that's the most, is euphoric the right word? I don't know, but that's like the greatest thing ever. So yeah, the community in terms of online is everything for sure.
Oh, I love that. And I have a question for you. Would you have started Culture Force in the way that you did? Would you have gone down? Is there any aspects of this path that actually, had you not have had to take this different pathway, had you have, I suppose, finished uni in the more traditional way, do you think that your pathway would have journeyed exactly as it has?
No, I mean, I definitely wouldn't have started making content for Culture Force if I wasn't well. Because the only reason I did it was because I had time on my hands and I was desperate to do something and fulfill my like boredom. So yeah, without my chronic illness, there definitely wouldn't be a Culture Force presence on the internet.
Wow. I think that's really powerful, because in that, the deaths that came through that, the world before, and your life as you navigated through, and then into this period of, as you're sort of coming potentially out of it, I think there's something really powerful in the rebirths. So what I could hear there is actually, there was the seed of Culture Force that sprouted and has flourished, as well as I'm assuming, is it the same to say when it comes to Kicks Force and sort of where you've taken that entrepreneurialism more widely as well? Has that all sort of been shaped, I suppose, through you navigating this pathway?
Yeah, I mean, literally everything I do day to day is completely shaped by the previous the health condition and what's happened previous, for sure. I mean, from a more practicality standpoint and a mentality standpoint as well. I mean, before I got ill, I was always I was very like mediocre and average in the sense of like grades. If that, I was really a little bit below average. Grades, performance, mentality, and actually like pushing myself. But now, because I think purely because I've gone through such a low point, I don't think that you're going to come across many people who are, which sounds super egotistical, but I don't think you're going to find many people who are as driven as I am. I've never had that drive before I got ill, like, at all. So it's completely, like, literally, utterly changed the way I am as a person for a good way, in a good way. Hopefully most people say in a good way, but it's, yeah, definitely in a traditional sense of like work and success and whatever. It's definitely, it shaped my day-to-day life and my kind of long-term goals in a good way.
I love that because actually, they say when we go through these big transitional, life changing, whether it's diagnosis, whether it's, for some of us, it's when we lose someone that we love and it's sudden, or even actually if it's a long path into it, the world changes. And often that can really crystallize our life purpose. In that moment, it's like, all right, what am I doing here? And, how can I do it my way? That's something that I've experienced. That's something that when I've been journeying with my clients as well, these moments that bring that sense of loss of what was, of grief, etc. I think that can be not for everyone, but for some that can be a really positive outcome, which is actually how can I do things my way? Step out of what I can hear from what you were sharing is, and I think there's so many boxes that we're expected to fit in when it comes to school, to uni, the traditional paths that actually for a lot of us, they're actually not the right spaces for us to be in and to grow and thrive and flourish. What I could feel is that actually there was obviously that light switch that kind of came on that changed things for you in
Yeah.
that moment and set that path to where you are now.
Yeah, 100%. And following that, I believe that everyone has that light switch that can be flicked on. But unfortunately, the reality of that, maybe 10% get it, 20% get it at school, and 30% get it at uni. But then you got 50% of the population who end up in the wrong pathway, because ultimately the pathways are so narrow, right? You've got after school, you get an apprenticeship, work, or go to uni. That's what you can do. You can't find yourself or figure out, you don't really have time to figure out what you really want to do. You just get trapped a little bit. And yeah, I think, yeah, the one benefit of being you and getting better, obviously the getting better is allows me to have that benefit. Without getting better, I wouldn't have, or progressing, it would be, there are a lot of people with my condition who don't fully ever get better, and I might never get all the way 100% again. But without that progression, I definitely, yeah, it's a sticky one. But yeah, without that kind of progression, I wouldn't have found that switch, or whatever that is. I always say that if I ever become stupidly rich, like filthy rich, like, like insane wealth, that I would find some kind of alternative to the traditional education system. I don't know what on earth I would look at it, but how I would do it, or what demographic or whatever, but there would definitely be some kind of alternative approach, and there should be an alternative approach. In fact, there's someone I'm quite close with, and he's like a mentor and helps me out with basically everything. He's just like a really good person.
Mm-hmm.
His lads have some learning difficulties, and similar to some people I know, like my brother and stuff like that, never got on well at school, like, at all. They just homeschool them, and they just completely homeschool them, and just let them, not even probably homeschool, they just just crack on and just learn through life. And I'm not saying that's guaranteed to work for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It probably won't, but there needs to be a more liberal approach, a wider approach for schooling, because I think a lot of people, it's probably a reason a lot of people don't, haven't got the best adult life. And I'm not going to say like it's the reason a lot of people have mental well-being issues and stuff, but there's definitely a lot of people struggle at school and
Mm-hmm.
uni in that traditional model, and there needs to be more models.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm really excited for when you have made your millions and this
Yeah,
project is kickstarting. I mean, it's that sort of thinking is so needed. And I think that's where people who have taken the unorthodox paths are really crucial to be uplifting your story, other stories, to be able to say, actually, there's a different way. If you don't fit in those boxes, it's all good. That doesn't mean that, as you're told at school, that's it. That, talking about death, that's a death of any of your ambition or aspirations to be a quote unquote success, because actually it's a very narrow definition of success. There's a whole world of opportunity out there, as you've shown. And so I suppose I've got a couple of final questions for you before we close out on our conversation. One is, I suppose sitting in this entrepreneurial seat that you're sitting in, what advice would you give? And it could be for any of us at any point of us just reconsidering, what the hell am I doing? There's got to be a better way of doing things that are more in alignment for me. What advice would you say to someone who wants to step on that path but has no idea what the first steps might be?
I think as soon as you really feel that kind of gut feeling, you need to kind of work on your the mentality, right? Because it's definitely a great idea to, if you're not in a good place work wise, professionally, whatever, or if you're just bored, whatever, it doesn't feel it's right for you or whatever, and you do want to take a bit of a leap and work on your own thing or work for yourself or do whatever, you do need to have a resilience and a mentality that's going to ultimately get you through it, because you can't really rely on anyone else. And you do need to do a lot. It's a lot more work initially. Towards the middle and end, when you start reaping the rewards, it's a lot less work. But initially, it's way more work. You've got to do so much more work. You've got to work all the time. You're not really switching off. It's constantly on your mind, and you've got to have a really healthy relationship, right, with your work. And that's really difficult to find. We spoke before about how difficult that is to find. So with myself, so yeah, that's definitely a must. And I guess, I guess a more kind of cringe traditional response to that would be, you do really need people around you to support you, because it's not guaranteed to work, and it's also going to be difficult, I guess, to an extent. Some people's level of difficulty will be a lot worse or a lot harder than others. So yeah, before you make that jump, you definitely need to be in a happy spot, like away from that professional life, like outside of work, and with your friends and people you can trust and family, all that kind of stuff, or just have someone there for you if not if it goes wrong, but who's going to give you proper support, like actual critique support, right? But yeah, I mean, if anyone is watching and has that kind of crossroads now, it's you just need to jump, but you need to make sure the things around you are good. But you do, as soon as that's sorted, you just jump, you just do it. And when I mean things around you good, I don't mean like work and professionalism. I mean like friends and external factors. Because if they're good, you're going to be in a much healthier headspace to make that big jump. Because it's such a huge life. I know you've done it, and I've kind of forced to do it, and then loads of people do it. And ultimately, if you do it right, it's probably the best thing ever. Because if but that jump is the hardest thing. It is really, really difficult, because there's never a right time, and there will be people around you who, like my parents, for example, were super, super supportive, but they don't really know what I do. Telling a 50, 60-year-old man that I'm going to go and make videos for the rest of my life, or for 5, 10 years, what's he doesn't it's difficult to understand and comprehend. So yeah, you need to really, really research the stuff around you, I would say, and just once you've figured out the people around you are good and are willing to support you, then just go. You just got to jump.
Yeah, I love that. That really resonates with my journey. And I think you're right as well, that initial acknowledgement is hard. It is hard on your nervous system. And I know that's something that obviously you're really mindful of, sort of, how do you feel in your body from that health perspective? And it is difficult, because it isn't, there's a real comfort zone in being, I don't know, in a traditional corporate job, getting the monthly paycheck. And actually, when you do this, it is really, really hard. And that's where you do need people alongside you who really get it, who understand. I remember how long it took me to explain to my parents about Jordan when he started jumping on his TikTok lives. They were like, "What does he do?" And then it was like, then when his first sort of brand deal, I think it was with eBay, came in, they were like, "Oh, we get it now." I was like, "Oh, okay." We come into the traditional space, but yeah, is that connection is really important. And my final question for you, Jack, is if you were to, from where you're sitting right now, write a note to yourself at the beginning of 2020, when you first started experiencing the symptoms of POTS, and you obviously didn't know what it was, and there was that long road ahead, what would you say to yourself from where you're sitting now?
Probably the first thing would be that I'm not going to die. I'm going to be okay. Like literally, I will be around in a few years' time. And then after that, I would say probably to trust the people around you the most, like my mum, for example. I never like cut her off or anything like that, but obviously when she was sure I had POTS and I was dismissed, obviously rightfully so. You just naturally side with the doctor's opinion, and so did she. But I would say to myself that, your body more than anyone else. No one else can tell you what you're feeling. Those symptoms that get passed off as anxiety, that they were when I was first getting diagnosed, and I knew something wasn't right. Asthma, anxiety is the easiest way to pass someone. It's the easiest way to diagnose someone with anything, right? You can go with you can probably go with knee pain, and some doctors would probably tell you it could be anxiety. So do truly believe in listen to your body. I don't know where I sit with that, and where I don't even know how I monitor it, but there is a point where you just have to sit back, and your body is, you're the only person who can truly feel what you're feeling. And sometimes it can be difficult to articulate that into words, but work on articulating it into words, because that will be super, super beneficial when you come to pitching it to these doctors. Because when you're seeing a doctor, it's a pitch. You're pitching to them. You are literally presenting to them what's going wrong. And if your pitch is bad, or like you break down, or you're not break down, but you struggle under pressure a little bit, that you get you misdiagnosed. They don't they don't understand correctly. So it's a really, really, really pressuring environment going into a doctor's consultation. But yeah, I would say something along those words, and just keep believing that you will get better, because ultimately I can, hopefully, and things will look up. It's just like a test of time, and to try and find small wins. And I eventually did that, and then started winning a little bit bigger.
Yeah, finding those small wins along the way. And also, obviously just honoring you and your journey. There's been many, many small wins, including obviously listening to your body and having that resilience and that perseverance to just keep going, keep pushing, and I can imagine it's really hard, because if you don't know, if it's not on paper, and Dr. Google hasn't thrown anything up, and what was rightly what it was has been dismissed, I can imagine that can be such a difficult journey. So, Jack,
sure.
Thank you so much for bringing all of you today, for sharing in your journey through your diagnosis and your recovery, and obviously sharing as well about the sort of the how your entrepreneurial journey is tracked alongside that. I'm feeling really, really inspired as well, and I have no doubt how you and your continued presence, to continue conversation when it comes to POTS is going to support others. And with that in mind, if anyone's listening and wants to find out how they can connect with you, where can they find you?
So probably the best place will be the POTS recovery account. So Culture Force Recovery is probably the way I'm going to prefer my content the most. But if for some reason, if you're into chronic illness / shoes and trainers and streetwear, you can find me on Culture Force. But there will be eventually, hopefully, maybe a longer format conversation about my health, maybe another podcast, or more like a daily diary type thing on YouTube, or an Instagram account. But for now, I'm just it is a lot to do, so I'm just trying to not overwhelm myself too much, and I'm trying to not make I'm trying to not monetize off POTS, which sounds really, really shitty, right? I'm not like I would do that, by the way, but like, I've had brands approach me for POTS and stuff like that, and you've got to realize that, understand that, making medical content, you have a lot of responsibility. And I'm obviously not a doctor, but there's people who watch my stuff because they're trying to get better. And if I start chatting about certain vitamins or random stuff, obviously that I'm never going to do. But stuff that doesn't ultimately do anything, that trust is broken. So, and that trust is the most valuable trust you could have between a medically unwell person and somebody who's kind of inspired to get their health back. But yeah, I don't know how I got to that answer after trying to plug my social media, but yeah, check out the POTS recovery account for sure. Culture Force Recovery on TikTok.
Love that. I will put all of the links in the show notes. I love that as well, your ethics and your values that run through it. And I just have to say as well, that runs into Kicks Force as well, your other sort of entrepreneurial venture with the sustainability sort of at the heart of it. So I can feel all of the heart that you bring into everything, Jack. And I'm so, so grateful for our conversation today.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It was an honor.
All of my gratitude to you for joining me for another Dead Conversation. Death on the Daily is edited by David Strutt. The music is Set Free by Katie Gray. And I am Tanya Wilkinson. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be over the moon if you can rate, review, and subscribe. It really, really helps me to get the word out there. And if you want to say hi or to hear more about my work as a coach and death doula, including how I support my clients to navigate their death on the daily, then all of the ways that you can connect with me are in the show notes. I'll be back soon with some more dead conversations. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something inside, and we'll never make it, and we'll never break it.